My name is Jeff Capadona. I'm the Associate Provost for Graduate Education. I want to thank you all for coming today, especially during finals week when grades are due and everything else that's going on campus preparing for graduation next week. So the event today is a product of the AI in Education Task Force. Provost Ward is going to introduce the members and talk a little bit more about them in a minute, so I'll leave that for her. I do want to thank Jocelyn Clemmings and Jimmy Salgado Juarez from ThinkBox. So Jocelyn's in the Provost office. This event would not have happened without her help with the organization. Thank you very much, Jocelyn. I know she could probably hear me from the back. And Jimmy's upstairs. ThinkBox did a great job providing the venue and organizing everything for us, so thank you. I also want to thank both Provost Ward and Maureen McHenry. So Maureen is the Faculty Senate chair this year. The two of them co-chaired this AI task force, and it was an excellent example of incredible collaboration between administration and the Faculty Senate. The team worked really well together. We started in the fall. We put together a roadmap, and this is one of the excuse me, my allergies are horrible this time of year. This is one of the products of what we started. So thank you for coming and participating in our event. With that, I want to turn it over to Provost Ward to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning to everyone. I'm so glad to see the room filled and all of you here today. So on behalf of Case Western Reserve University, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever AI in Education Symposium. And your presence here today signifies your commitment to really staying at the forefront of innovation in academia. And that is critical for our students and for our world. And so for that, I'm truly grateful to all of you. The symposium is an output of our AI in Education Task Force. And this task force was led by me and Faculty Senate Chair Maureen McHenry. And as an aside, I just want to thank Maureen for not only the work on the AI task force, but also for her leadership in Faculty Senate throughout the year. It has been an incredible journey to work with her, and we have really made an impact for the university. So I just want to give her a round of applause. Thank you. The AI task force included more than 40 faculty, staff, and administrators who work collaboratively to generate a common vision and to create a roadmap to leadership in AI educational outcomes. If you are a member of the AI task force, can you please stand to be recognized? Thank you so much for all of your work on this. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to the task force members who organized this event, and particularly Jeff Capadona, our Associate Provost for Graduate Education and also an engineering professor. Your dedication and expertise have made this symposium possible. Thank you, Jeff, and our entire team for organizing this event. In addition to today's events, this year the team has already held a series of using AI in the classroom, lunch and learns. And I can tell you that I've been incredibly impressed by the appetite, get that with the lunch and learns, thank you, of our faculty for these types of really events to train each other and to talk to each other and to collaborate. These events have been well attended and have had major waiting lists on most of them and have sparked engaging discussions about the potential of AI to really revolutionize education. It is clear that at Case Western Reserve, we recognize the profound impact that AI can have on teaching, learning, and research. And we are committed to harnessing its power to enhance the educational experience, and that's why we are all here. Our relationship with AI is one built on innovation, collaboration, and adaptation. As we navigate an ever-changing landscape of higher education, which couldn't be more clear today, it is imperative that we embrace new technologies and methodologies to ensure that we remain at the forefront of academic excellence, as our employers of our students will expect that of us. Today, we have the opportunity to engage in meaningful discussions, share best practices, and explore innovative approaches to integrating AI into our educational practices. And I encourage each of you to actively participate in the sessions, ask questions, and exchange ideas with your colleagues. Together, we can pave the way for a future of AI that empowers us to unlock new possibilities and achieve even greater heights of academic success, and also to do that ethically. And we have incredible researchers here who are focused on the ethics of AI in our world, and that will be a critical component of this moving forward, and I think we do that better than any other university between our humanities professors, our engineering professors, our scientists, and those that teach our students in the classroom. Now, without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the first speaker, Anne Foreman-Lippens. Anne is the Managing Director for Research at EAB. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, EAB is a leader in transforming education and communities. With over 2,500 partnerships, they drive change through data-driven insights and best-in-class capabilities. Case Western Reserve has worked with EAB for many years in support of various initiatives across campus, and we are thrilled to welcome Anne here today. Anne has been with EAB since 2011 and has led research efforts across a range of topics, including university finances, deferred maintenance, my favorite topic, space utilization, cybersecurity, and many other areas. She currently oversees all of the research division's work addressing administrative, finance, and operational issues for higher education clients. She received a degree in classics from Harvard University, there's the power of the humanities again, in 2011, and hails from Prairie Village, Kansas, of which I know well. And so let's give Anne a warm applause and welcome. Thank you, Anne.
That's great. Usually I do my own intros, but it's very nice when someone else does it for me, so I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Morning. This is very exciting for me. I think it was pretty clear from that I am one of the business affairs research leaders at EAB. So it's a little bit of a switching of roles here that I get 90 minutes. I originally got 60, but I requested 90 minutes this morning. Thank you, Jeff, where we get to switch roles a little bit. So I'm going to be up here talking about AI. 90 minutes is a while, so if you need to step away, I won't be insulted. I will recognize that you are just listening to your bodies, which is what I tell my two adorable little girls. You are a body boss. If you need to step away, totally fine. I also know that we are recording this for later distribution. I'm a little bit of a pacer, so if I get this way too much, that's good, but it's also bad, so I'll try to balance it out by going this way, and hopefully it will be a good recording. So as we dig into this content this morning, I think where I wanted to start is just recognizing that AI, I'm going to quote someone that is part of the faculty senate here at Case Western and say that it can feel like when folks like me come in, we are part of the church of AI, right? That we are here to proselytize and convince you that this is the next great thing, that everyone needs to buy in. And I want to say at the outset that I'm not here to convince you of anything per se. Instead, I am an ambassador of what I hear from my partner institutions. We, as the provost shared, we work with thousands of institutions across not only North America, but globally as we expand our footprint in countries like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and continental Europe. And I wouldn't want you to take anything that I am saying here today as this is what EAB is telling you to do. We are here to tell you that we spent months, hundreds of interviews, researching this question and any other question that we explore. And we want to report back our findings to you to help you understand what is happening across higher education and what pieces of that do you want to take away to apply here at Case Western. I will also note I'm very excited to be in this space. In a past life at EAB, I ran our facilities forum, which was the research division that served senior facilities officers. You can guess that we profiled the Think Box many times in our Campus of the Future research, so a very exciting opportunity for me personally. All right, with that, and in the spirit of getting the engagement started, I do want to see if this works. Nope, I turned it off. All right, we're great. Okay. I want to start with a quick show of hands. So this is a conversation about AI. I thought it would be nice if we could start with a little bit of an orientation of what level of utilization do we have here in the room. So without, outing yourselves at one end of the spectrum or the other if that is not comfortable for you. For those of you who have never tried AI, could you please raise your hand? Okay, we got a couple folks. Very curious to hear more about that. But let's go to the next one. Tried it once or twice. You've dabbled. Okay, it's a good number. Use it regularly, anyone? Okay, all right. About equal in number. Does anyone consider themselves a daily power user of AI? I got a hand back here, right here. Anyone else right here? 4, 5. Okay, so we have people who are all over the spectrum. And I think that's really representative not only of where, let's say, anyone might be, any organization, but higher ed specifically, because we are such a diverse community, right? We have many different disciplines that we represent, many different roles, many different aspirations as we help the institution accomplish its mission of teaching, research, and service. And again, that means that we have to be able to bring everyone along, no matter where they are in that particular personal relationship with AI. And I think that speaks to different personas that we see in university leadership positions. So when we started this research, and I won't tell you that I think everyone should be at the far right of the spectrum, but I will say that back in November 2022 and in the months following, there were folks who felt like, is this just the next fad? Is this sort of like MOOCs? It's the next big thing in higher education, and it's going to be a flash in the pan when we sort of zoom out and let it all settle. I think we've largely stepped away from that sensibility that this is something that might actually disappear. More folks might perhaps consider themselves passive observers, right? It can feel a little bit like stepping into the middle of Times Square in New York, right? There's a lot of bright, flashy things around. It's constantly changing. It's distracting. But you're there. You're consuming information. You're interested to see where AI lands, or at least what next steps an institution like Case Western might take. Moving farther to the right, I think there are those who are a little bit farther along in their own relationship where they're saying, yeah, I'm actually curious to know what can this do, not just for me, but for the teams and the departments and the units that I work with. Is there some good to be had? Not quite sure what it can do for me, but I'm willing to explore. And then moving all the way to the far right, there are the AI champions out there. AI, they might say, it's going to transform every part of higher education. We need to be a part of it. And we talk to cabinet leaders all the time. I've just been talking a lot with chief business officers, chief financial officers, provosts, presidents, and they are all over the place. We even had a CBO who recognized, like some of you in the room, that he himself was a stubborn skeptic. And I'm hopeful that when he left our presentation, he was at least in the passive observer category. I would like to hear from the room. I am very curious to know if there are reactions in terms of where this group feels like Case Western leadership is. Do they feel like it's a group of AI champions? Seeing some nodding. Then maybe there's some mixed feelings about AI. Yeah, please.
I think, it applies like the diffusion of innovation.
Oh, yeah, we have microphones. Let me hand that to you.
I think the stages of diffusion of innovation applies to your model too.
Yeah.
So people are, that some of them are early adopters, some of us are innovator, some of us are laggers, and AI, like the risk is not that high, which makes it easy for us to kind of be AI champion, or at least curious examiner. But with the any innovation, we usually wait and think, okay, is it gonna have any risks? And then we will be more of a curious examiner. But I think, there's no reason to be there. I think we should be the AI champion, because I don't see, there should, everything has risks, but I don't see obvious risks at this point.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? Anyone else want to respond to that? Anyone feel like even the risk point, not for you personally, but we have certainly heard folks land in very different spots when it comes to, are the risks real? How large are they? And we're going to come back to that later if folks don't want to weigh in right quite yet. Okay. All right, so this is again, a general spectrum. Movement to the right we've seen in the past year and a half, going on 2 years now, in terms of how folks are approaching AI. One CBO complained, yeah, well, we have a president who's an AI champion, but gosh, they're not giving us any money to support this. They're pretty much treating it like a free tool and asking us to make it happen. Another CBO responded, that's fairly typical for a president. But in the end, certainly a space for us to all be recognizing that we are in a slightly different moment. And this slide really captures why. When we think about AI, specifically generative AI, because I think a lot of us recognize the idea of AI has been real in use for 50 years, many decades. What is really new is the generative piece of this. And I want to talk about that in two separate ways. On the left is recognition of how fast adoption has taken place for various pieces of technology. We think about things like television, telephones as ubiquitous. The reality is it took quite a long time to reach the point of, in this case, 100 million users. For the telephone, that was 75 years. For TV, that was nearly 40 years. The internet took 8 years. Facebook took 5. ChatGPT took 2 months. I'm not trying to say that those folks are some of those daily users, but within 2 months, 100 million people had at least gone to the platform, created a login, and started to engage with that tool. That is, I mean, look, the limit almost doesn't exist here, right? It's incredible adoption. On the other side, what is it about generative AI that is making it so compelling or interesting? 3 reasons we would say. One is that it's accessible. It's user-friendly, right? It is available to anyone that has a tablet, a laptop, a phone. They can get on their device and start using it immediately. The second is, of course, it is trained on a vast amount of human knowledge. And lastly, what it produces is almost indistinguishable or indistinguishable, depending on how you feel about things like AI detectors, from human content. And that's not limited to text, of course, right? We're seeing these images and code and audio, right? There's lots of different forms. No form of human output now really is safe from generative AI content. So we do really feel like this is the moment of AI for everyone. And it is, to a certain extent, even if you are a stubborn skeptic, even if you haven't yourself gone onto that platform and started using it, it's already here, right? It's not, while I'm not part of the church of AI, I do recognize that it is unavoidable in certain senses of the word. And what I mean by that is 2 reasons. One, it is already something that vendors are thinking about. Every major vendor, every minor vendor is in the AI space. Microsoft is incorporating AI features every day, right? If you have an E3 or an E5 or an A3, A5 license, you can turn on Microsoft Copilot, not 365, just Copilot immediately, right? You can start using Bing and it will, up to a certain point, allow you to interact with Microsoft's AI features. Adobe is incorporating this. You may laugh when you see EAB on here, and I'm a researcher. I really prefer there to be an iron curtain between, the work that we're doing in the research division and the other divisions within EAB. But at the same time, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize that even our technology platforms are, thinking through this question of how do we bring AI features into this tool. So they're coming your way. Whether or not you use it may be a different question. But certainly folks on campus are using them already as well. 89% of students are admitting to using ChatGPT in their coursework. It's not limited to students, although my colleague Afia Tesneem likes to look at this and say, well, I think 11% of students are liars. I did get my hands on some of the data from the Case Western Reserve University student and faculty survey. I found it very interesting. I'm not sure if that's been widely circulated, Jeff. But some of the questions were related to students. How frequently are you using this? I thought that was a very bold question for Case Western to ask because it looked pretty low. And if you ask faculty how much they think students are using it and compare it to how much students self-report they're using it, there is a very wide gulf. I'm not saying that either one is right or wrong. I'm just saying that's not a super surprising finding. Nor are staff and faculty exempt from this curiosity, this hunger, this desire to experiment a little bit. So 67% of higher education staff reported using generative AI in the last academic year. There have been some pretty fun moments when it comes to AI. The president of Wells College, Jonathan Gibraltar, gave his commencement address. And it was a beautiful address. Lots of nice notes, really wrapped the year nicely for those seniors. At the end of the address, he did reveal that the entire thing had been written by generative AI. And he wasn't alone last commencement season. And this commencement season, I'm guessing, with or without credit, more presidents will be going in that direction. Congratulations, by the way, for making it to finals week. So a lot of experimentation happening. But I do want to touch on the risks piece. Because again, it wouldn't be right to go into this conversation too much further if we didn't spend a little bit of time acknowledging these. So a couple slides about that. And I want to talk about first things that we think of as a little bit more core to what IT's responsibility is, right? Privacy and security. I say IT's responsibility, but it's really the university's responsibility to make sure that these things, the data is kept private, that user information is secure. Those are true, real mandates for the institution, but that IT certainly is often responsible for executing on that. And the risks are real. We would say a licensed tool compared to something like, okay, you've gone on to OpenAI, it's using whatever you put in there to train its model. That's less secure, certainly. But as you build licensed tools, as you limit their use cases, we would say that these are largely manageable, to the comment that one of the faculty members has made. There are things that we can do. We should be thinking about the user education component here. And I have to laugh because as was shared in my intro, I have participated and led cybersecurity research before, which is essentially, hey, universities, what are some of those best practices for enhancing cybersecurity on campus? And one of them was simply making sure everyone is doing annual cybersecurity training. I don't feel like we've mastered that in higher ed. So it's a little bit tricky to say, okay, well, do we already have let's call it a vector by which we can communicate safe data handling practices unless we make it mandatory? Open question for faculty to discuss, but certainly something we should be thinking about. How do we make sure people have the education they need so that they can be responsible users of the tools that we want them to use? And then again, we would say, to the degree that you are looking to explore, you want to be thinking about institutionally deployed tools. Anyone familiar, with Triton GPT? Some nodding. So what's happening in higher ed is that in a bid to direct users to more secure platforms, schools like UCSD, University of Michigan, they are building their own GPTs. And UCSD's mascot is a Triton, which is But now this is also their platform. It's a sandbox environment where they're not necessarily telling you what to do with it. They're just giving you a more secure environment where you can do your own experimentation. So that's the privacy piece. Security, again, always something that we should be thinking about in higher ed. There are many security frameworks out there, one in particular called NIST, that your IT, your cybersecurity experts are probably already using, and making sure we follow those sorts of frameworks will still ensure that our environment is secure as we use these AI tools. Have you yourselves ever said, hallucination is something that scares me about AI? Can you just raise your hand, even if you haven't literally articulated that verbally? that makes sense, right? We are a group of faculty members, and accuracy is paramount to the jobs that we do. And we should be thinking about that. I'm going to show an example later, but what I want to say is, I think oftentimes when we look at these AI tools, we think if it's not 100% accurate, we shouldn't be using it. And I would push back and say, are humans 100% accurate? Now, is that not always the standard that we should be applying? Maybe not. But there are ways in which we can safely offer tools. And if the hallucination happens, we can minimize it by thinking about limited applications and using retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially how do we limit the amount of information we're pulling from to ensure that the information we feed back is narrower in scope. Bias. Bias is another big one. I think many of us saw the headlines when Google Gemini was producing photos of diverse Nazis, right? And they said, hey, look, we messed up here. Bias is real. And it's real in AI tools because it is a human problem, right? It's not inherent to the platform. It's inherent to the people who are programming it. And the reality is there's no way to easily eliminate bias from AI tools. What we come back to is similar themes here, right? Let's narrow the scope of the tools so that the margin for bias is smaller. This also demonstrates that the bias in AI models reflects the biases that we have in real life, right? So how do we make sure that we are generally raising awareness around those biases so, again, people are more thoughtful users of these tools? Last piece is simply monitoring, right? As this happens, we don't want to set it and forget it. We need to make sure and constantly test that these tools are ones that we are comfortable with people using, that they do mitigate bias, that over time they don't, let's say, drift, and that there's some sort of monitoring and auditing that takes place of these tools as we deploy them. So those are the risks that we hear most frequently. I've got mics up here. I'm curious to know if people want to discuss any other risks before we get into some of the teaching. Right here.
I'm pretty loud.
Listen, the recording's not going to catch you. You mind handing that over? Thank you.
This isn't directly related to education, but I was wondering if you could just comment on some of the disruption in terms of like people's jobs and economic disruption and other things that could affect people in higher ed as well.
Sorry. I'm putting you to work, so appreciate it. Yeah, so the question, let me get up to this mic. The question was around disruption to people's jobs. And I think about this in a couple of different ways. One is that, yes, that's absolutely happening, right? Some of what we are trying to do in some of the, let's call it early use cases of AI, is find things that we can automate, eliminate from an individual's role. And you see in the case of things like Klarna, I think it's a Swedish company. They're the company where if you don't want to pay for a product that, let's say, costs $100 all at once, you can pay for it in 5 installments of $20 or $22, as the case might more likely be, right? They did lay off folks after they automated or they built an AI tool to deal with customer inquiries. So I think the risk is real, but it's not new to this technology. There's always been the threat that as new tools come in, it is going to eliminate certain roles. But ultimately, the impact of these tools is that it lifts productivity globally, right? That there are more opportunities created by the advent of a tool like this, such that while some jobs are eliminated, more jobs are ultimately created. And I think in higher ed, this is the second part of my answer, something I kept coaching my team on as they did this research was, you don't need to tell anyone in higher ed what to do with their spare capacity, right? Everyone is stretched thin. This is an environment where we're having conversations about retention, overwork, burnout. There's a lot of promise in AI, and I can think of maybe one school that has eliminated roles because of the introduction of AI tools. Everyone else is using it to get time back to do more human tasks. That's what I see happening in higher ed. All right, so with those risks acknowledged, I'm going to grip this so that I don't walk away from the mic. This is what we want to talk through today. I'm going to try to be, Jeff, maybe you just remind me, when are we wrapping at 10:45, 11? You tell me. Okay, 10:45, great. Thank you, appreciate that. Because like many of you, I love a platform. So I will just keep talking. Okay, so this is the structure for our presentation, right? When I said at the outset, I'm not here to tell you to do anything. I want to give you a framework to think about this AI question. And this is how EAB, this is where we have landed, that there are 5 opportunities in terms of how we think higher ed will be transformed, a word I use loosely, which is to say there will be change, not that these are net new things that we are doing in higher ed, but that we are going to do them differently because we have the promise of AI. And the first relates to curriculum, students, how do we prepare them for the future of work? The second is around personalized student support. Yes, we are going to be talking briefly about chatbots. Third is supercharging faculty and staff productivity. Fourth is maximizing enrollment and advancement yield. And then lastly, in an area that I think is most exciting, but transparently, where EAB is least likely to get involved, except for the one slide you see from me here, how can AI enable us to transform the bounds of innovation in research? With that, we'll just turn into our first transformative opportunity around incorporating AI into the curriculum to prepare our students for the future of work. Now, I did, like I said, get a sneak preview at the strategic plan that Case Western Reserve is thinking about. And I'll say, I think a lot of these are already on the radar of folks here at Case Western, but I'll nod to it. And where I want to start is we need to increase familiarity for everyone across campus, right? That is actually the purpose of this, right? You know that you're here because you want to engage in that conversation, increase your own, let's call it AI literacy. So on the left, ideas for how we're thinking about this for faculty. First and foremost, what have we said in terms of encouraging our faculty to engage AI, to embrace AI? And I think this is important because on the one hand, reasonably, faculty members say, you know, our academic integrity policies, our policies, they don't need to be updated with regards to AI because it's already reflective of what faculty should be thinking about. On the other hand, it can be confusing for students to not have clear guidance about how does the university feel. I'm not actually sure this would work, but for instance, had Case Western, I'm going to stop there. But you can think about what would it mean for students if they really felt like this is an environment that fully embraces AI. So that's what USC did. University of Mississippi. Again, in a bid to increase faculty familiarity, they are paying faculty members to participate in a 2-day workshop, essentially, on AI. And then lastly, schools like Georgetown, and there are many schools doing this, and I think Case Western is headed in this direction, although I might be talking out of school, that they're thinking about, how do we actually fund faculty to do this sort of investigation and this integration of AI into their own curriculum. So a lot of schools that are setting aside $50K, $100K grants on that, small grants to fund faculty proposals. That's faculty. On the right, for students, thinking through how do we get students comfortable with AI as soon as they get in the door. USF is a Jesuit institution in San Francisco, of course, and they are starting to incorporate a Zoom orientation to that first week for students, right? No one's leaving an expert, but it does set something of a tone. Hey, look, you come here, we're going to get you comfortable the moment that you start on our campus. Vanderbilt offering free AI training for everyone, and this doesn't just touch on how to use AI in your academic life, it also applies in your clubs outside of school. And lastly, Hong Kong University has taken an interesting approach. They were one of the schools out the gate that said no one is allowed to use AI. But they actually only did that because they said we want to get comfortable and figure out what this is going to do for us. So 6 months later, 12 months later, I can't remember the exact time frame, they came back out with this new plan. And they said we're actually going to subsidize the cost of access to ChatGPT for our students. And we're going to give you access to Coursera modules. We're not going to teach you immediately on AI. We're going to work on it. But in the short term, we want you to have a little bit more hands-on training. So go to Coursera and take some courses on AI and start there. For faculty, in these next two slides, these are actually the first time I'm presenting them because they're relatively new slides. So I'm curious for feedback. It does leave an interesting question. In rightly support of academic freedom, your choice to be building the curriculum, the syllabi, the assignments that are most appropriate for your students, for your discipline. Faculty have a choice, right? They can think through, and in many cases simultaneously, what would it look like to AI-proof your assignment, right? How do we scaffold our assignments to break them into smaller pieces, or really think about that real world component to the assignments? And I'll jump down to the last one, asking questions that ask a student to reflect on experiences that they uniquely have had and do not apply to the AI. Hey, reflect on a classroom discussion, things of that nature. The other end of the spectrum is to think about what would an AI-first assignment look like? To explicitly state this assignment asks you to first go to generative AI, use ChatGPT, use Microsoft Copilot, and have it do the first draft of an essay, edit it, submit it back. And I want to see how you apply critical thinking to this discipline, right? And, there are benefits to both. I don't think that you need to do all of one or all of the other. I think there's value in both sides of this. What I do think is tricky is students navigating an environment where faculty might be at any given time in any given assignment on either side of the spectrum. And so the thing we can do is really encourage faculty to have an AI statement and to make it really clear about the acceptable use of AI, not just for the university, but for that course and for a specific work. And on that topic, my colleagues, Abhi Panthagani and Ben Zavalos, they wrote a great little article that I've linked here about incorporating AI into pedagogy. And these were their takeaways. And I really liked them. I don't usually do this. Usually I edit people later. I just copied and pasted them here. Here's what they said. They said, discourage the use of AI plagiarism detectors since they rarely work as advertised. I want to pause on that one and ask folks, let me think of a question that doesn't feel uncomfortable. Are people comfortable with AI detectors? Oh gosh, I love it. No one is like vigorously nodding their head, but maybe because this is just the wrong question. I'm like, I don't think I'm coming across as the right person to say, yes, let's use them. But I think I'm not sure anyone would disagree if I said AI will always outpace a detector's ability to determine if it is AI. The second is to trust faculty to define the bounds of AI tool use within their course, but push for them to set clear course and assignment level guidelines. I've already hit that point home. Third is voicing your support for incorporating AI tools in the classroom. And then lastly, as we've talked about, making sure we are facilitating ongoing faculty experimentation with AI so that they can continue to evolve their approach, right? I think, it's sort of like prototyping or active learning spaces. This is a great example. Like I said, I've worked a lot with facilities leaders and chief business officers, and boy, there was quite a number of institutions that in the past 5-10 years put up these huge active learning centers. EAB is based in DC in our backyard. University of Maryland College Park built an entire building of active learning spaces. But what many institutions have come to find is it's really hard to get full value out of these incredibly tech-enabled spaces if you don't also pair it with the training for faculty on how to adapt their curriculum to that space. It can be very different for folks that are used to stand and deliver to adapt it to this highly interactive environment. And so same thing here, right? Making sure we are pairing this push on AI in our pedagogy and our curriculum with opportunities to experiment. Boy, I'm doing a lot of talking. I'd love reactions. Disagreement, full-throated agreement, both are welcome. Is anything missing from these? Is there anything I left off the considerations piece where you think, and we could be doing X or we are doing X, and that's the right thing to be doing that others could learn from?
I think it's unknown, right? I think we don't have a choice.
Thank you.
I think it's unknown, right? I don't think we have a choice but to figure out the best practices forward, because the students will use AI whether we want them to or not. And we have to embrace it in order to implement it as a resource and incorporate it in. How it will function is probably a dynamic process. Yeah. You know, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, so I can't say disagree or agree. I think it's more a matter of developing the right steps forward and sort of testing the hypothesis as you're moving forward.
Yeah, love it. Reactions? Oh, yes, wonderful, thank you.
Just the briefest comment about something that's missing. My survey of students worldwide is that they are, on average, very far out in front of their faculties. So my first bit would be to place the responsibility not on the faculty as information gatherers and designers, but as evaluators and deciders. The first thing to do is to ask the students what they want the AI component of the course to be, and then try to weigh the input you receive. So that's how I run it. That doesn't seem to be up there.
And what is the level of confidence we bring to the candor students will bring to that conversation? Oh, was there another? No, please. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is generally for the room, right? I think that's a great idea. I love it. I'm always skeptical, as I'm sure many of you are, of asking students what they want. I've for instance, in my research teams told them, you are no longer allowed to bring me data that X variable or factor will be the determining factor for why a student chooses an institution, because I have seen it all. Sustainability goals, that's the thing that's going to be mental health resources, right? These are all things that are important to students, but if we just ask people what they want, I think the answer is going to be, yeah, that sounds great. So I do wonder what needs to precede that question such that students feel like they're in a position to be really directive about what they want that experience to feel like. Yeah, please.
I was hoping that you could comment a bit more on discouraging the use of AI detection versus using it cautiously. My experience talking with faculty about academic integrity, which is what I used to refer to as AI, is that they are using the detection, and it is helpful in their conversations with students, particularly when there is a high degree of suspicion from the software that it has been. So I've been encouraging the cautious use rather than discouraging the use. So I'd like to hear a bit more about that.
What I got from what you're asking is there is potentially a place for AI detection tools, in that it could help a student in the use of such a tool to AI-proof their own work. And I would counter with, yes, I'm going to go to specific examples. If you think about a student for whom English is not their first language, it is possible that students like that will be unfairly called out as the ones who are more likely to be using those tools because it is easier for them to be detected. The output from an AI tool is going to be more, perhaps, let's say, English first than it would be for someone who has a demonstrated history of, okay, well, English is my second language and this is not necessarily, this doesn't read like something that I would have normally written. And so I think that it is interesting to test the boundaries of situations like that. One, that it could potentially lead to a less equal experience for certain students. And two, if AI's output continues to evolve, and we have every reason to think it will, to every day better and better mimic human-like output, at what point do the Venn diagrams overlap so much that there is no value in asking the question, is this output AI, read as AI versus not? That's a question for this group. Yeah, and I see some hands here.
I think we need to redefine how we can assess or measure learning. If we use the old ways with the new technology, it's not going to work for us. So we don't need really to those detectors, because if I want my student to learn something, I'm gonna give them like an assignment to write an article or write an essay, and then the next step is how you can apply this. So the first step, okay, write it. You can use AI. I'm not gonna, use the detectors to see but if the hallucination is crazy, then this is kind of sloppy work. And then the next step, should be applied somehow, a conversation, a project, just to kind of show that there is some competency developed by just assigning this assignment in the first place. So I have to have some good objective, clear, and then I have to make sure that my students are applying what they learned, even if they didn't write this essay.
Thank you. Right here.
I want to second, basically.
Is the mic on? Yeah, I don't think I turned it on.
I want to second what she just said. And my perspective on this is, if you think about the calculator, people these days don't use their brain anymore for actually doing simple science in the lab, simple math in the lab. And they have to go to the iPhones, calculator, whatever. Similar to AI application, I mean, if you want to use it, but also use your brain and learn from it. And students are old enough that they have a responsibility. If they don't want to learn, they're a problem. That's my perspective on this.
Thank you. I actually think the calculator is a really interesting reference for this conversation, because okay. Just like a calculator, AI is a situation where we can use it in the classroom or not. It makes sense that some classes say, no, you are here to learn the ticky-tacky, step-by-step process to do this equation or prove this theorem. You are not using your calculator. There's other classes or labs where, yeah, you absolutely want to use that as your starting point. So I think AI will follow a similar, and I don't take any credit for that. Yeah, Jeff.
I have microphones.
Perfect.
So I have 2 college-age daughters. Neither of them came to case. Yeah, I'm not bitter at all. They're both home from college after their freshman and sophomore year, and what I've asked them about AI. One of them came home to take her last final online, and all they talked about was every assignment that they do, is there a way to use AI to help them with it or do it? Another said that they used the AI checker for everything that they wrote, whether they used AI or not.
Right.
And it's the things that they did not use it had a higher score of use of AI than the ones that they did. So
Interesting.
they're testing it on, they're testing the electric fence constantly.
Yeah, I like that. I see a hand over here. And this is on.
Thank you so much. I just had a couple of comments. One, that it seems to me very discipline specific, what, sort of the boundaries and the protocols would be. The other has to do with that November 2022 date and the 100 million mark. I'm wondering if it was coincident with the end of semester, because I noticed it That was when I first noticed it on final papers in that semester. And the reason why I noticed it was not because of a detection tool, it was simply because I knew the quality of the students' writing from other assignments in the course. And I was able to identify it by actually, my daughter, home from break, took my final assignment prompt and put it into ChatGPT. That was the first time we used it, and it spit out a paper very much like the one that I received from this student. But the only reason I detected it was because I knew the student and their writing.
Yeah, I have heard through the grapevine. Thank you. Someone at EAB knows someone that works at OpenAI, and they reported that their processing requirements, their utilization went down summer 2023, and they directly attributed that to students going on a summer break. But that's the rumor mill for you. Who knows? All right, great conversation. Thank you, everyone, for participating. That was very much the sort of do now activities, right? These are the questions that we as faculty leaders should be engaging in on our campus. I do want to look a little bit toward the future, right? And I know Case Western is already doing this. I want to put a little structure to it. If we think about how will roles change, it's not a question of when, it's a question of how. And this is 4 ways in which we're already seeing AI start to change the conversation around certain roles. So if you remember last summer, very dramatically, the Hollywood Writers Guild was on strike. And amongst their many, requirements, concerns, a primary one was related to the use of AI to develop scripts. Well, if you can just take my previous writing, pop it in, and pop out unlimited numbers of scripts, my job is not safe. Legal services, there's been research showing that nearly half of legal work could be automated. I very gleefully reported this to my lawyer brother. On graphic design, right? This is a very intensive career choice that requires a lot of training and experience. Well, not anymore, right? If a simple prompt can turn all of us into artists, it really does change the name of the field. In software engineering, a McKinsey study has found that software developers can complete coding tasks up to twice as fast as they use generative AI. My husband is always spinning up the next great idea, according to him, and he often uses ChatGPT now to write code. And certainly there's a lot of money and investment in this space, right? On the left, just a couple of ways in which, there's so many data points here, but we grabbed a couple from World Economic Forum, Goldman Sachs, 53% of increase in demand for certain types of roles. Estimates that we're going to see 1 million new AI machine learning jobs, and companies certainly thinking about how they're going to be incorporating AI into their own roadmaps, strategic plans, the way they do their business. And that, at the macro level adds up to major economic change, right? I'll call out a couple of stats here. Estimates that 50% of tasks we currently complete could be automated. Obviously not evenly split across different roles, but certainly something to chew on. And 7% increase in global GDP because of generative AI. This comes back to the tension between the micro, yes, jobs will be eliminated, jobs will be changed, and the macro, there's going to be growth here, right? There are more jobs that are going to be created. And if you don't believe me, believe Bill Gates, right? He's certainly more informed than I am on the scale of major changes. He says AI's impact will be as big as the introduction of the PC, right? Word processing applications did not do away with office work, but they changed it forever. You've probably seen quotes about AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI is going to take your jobs. That's one of my favorites as well. We've talked about this already, but there are, gotta stay by the mic. There are 3 categories that we like to think about when we talk about how AI will impact roles. And I'm going to go through these out of order, starting on the far left with roles that are made redundant by AI. Let us recognize and have a moment of silence for jobs that truly will be either because they will see continued accelerated losses or newly impacted, likely fewer roles in that space. This includes media, right? Media jobs, journalism, data entry, and perhaps new eliminations around administrative and secretarial support, coders, and technical writers. Although for anyone who's been in the software engineering space, I don't think technical writing being offloaded is too much of a hardship. In total, estimates from Lightcast that 19% of U.S. workers are in jobs that are exposed to AI. Jumping to the far right, new roles created by AI. Lot of fun job titles here. Things like prompt engineer and librarian, head of AI. Schools are not exempt from thinking about these roles. We've certainly interviewed folks that said, yeah, we're hiring a chief AI officer. Not a lot of them. There's not a lot of free resources to play with in higher ed, but certainly some schools are looking in that direction because they are very serious about embracing AI. AI consultants, AI prompt engineer creators. I mean, it's crazy to think about on one hand, but on the other hand, 15 years ago, we did not think content creator, social media star was a job, right? Absolutely going to see new jobs coming. However, we would say far and away the biggest category are the number of jobs that are going to be impacted by AI, right? Again, it's that quote about AI is not going to take your job. Someone who knows how to use it in graphic design, in protein science, in content writing are going to be taking your job. And I want to put this in perspective a little bit, recognizing that these are best guess estimates from our brains, not from some resource that we are citing here. It's not that everyone needs to be an AI expert, though if you ask faculty in physics and computer science, they'll tell you, yes, students are far ahead of us here, and what we need are GPUs. Certainly some of that is true. There are those that are going to be the future AI visionaries, right? The Sam Altmans of the world who are going to be developing novel applications, really pushing us forward in terms of how AI functions. That's going to be a pretty small segment of the workforce, though. In the middle, there are going to be folks that are a little bit more technical. And I don't use the term technical to mean in the way we think of it today, because I do think that there is a space for an AI manipulator to look like someone a little bit more with my background, right? I'm not job hunting, but you can have a liberal arts background and go into an AI manipulator role because English is now the most powerful coding language in the world, right? That's the promise of AI. So a larger segment of the workforce is going to be AI manipulators, right? They're training AI models, they're fine-tuning, they are building new applications. More of these than the visionaries, but again, the largest category by far is going to be at the very bottom. We'd say 95% of the workforce is just going to be a basic common AI user. They understand what it is. They understand how to navigate. For instance, I'm not saying this specifically, but as a representative flavor, they know how to navigate Microsoft Copilot 365. They know how to use that, right? It talks to their data and they know how to talk back. And they are ready to use standard productivity applications of AI in their role and in their personal life. So how do we equip students for that? Well, there's a couple ways you could go about this. At one end of the spectrum, there's the University of Florida, and I will credit them with having a reasonable claim to calling themselves the AI University, not the only school that could say that, but certainly they've been at it since 2019, 2020. This really did precede OpenAI's ChatGPT launch. University of Florida decided back, 4 years ago, they were going to be all in on AI at the cabinet level. They made that decision. And what this looked like in execution is that they hired 100 new faculty members across all 16 colleges, each one of them with an AI background for that particular discipline, every college getting at least one new faculty hires. And the result is that as of a couple months ago, they had 230 AI courses offered at the undergraduate, graduate, and professional levels. You can see some references on the right. AI in ag, business applications of AI, AI in healthcare. Naturally, this has led to more research applications. Interesting question. AI system detecting bruised strawberries before they hit the market. Other ways that this is being brought to life as well on the career services side. But I would say first and foremost, this is very much about incorporating AI into their curriculum. It's a pretty big undertaking. I don't think everyone needs to go this far. And I would say Case Western is certainly thinking about and has already made steps towards, what we've highlighted here, that AI is being incorporated more into its curriculum. So, perhaps a better way to think about it is experimentation and co-creation. This is Imperial College London, based in London. And they're thinking about how do they incorporate AI in instruction, assessment, and curriculum. So they're working together with staff to make sure that they sort of AI-proofed, not AI-proofed, that they've taken an AI-first approach to certain assignments. On the assessment front, they are working with 1,000 different students to actually give personalized feedback, AI-driven personalized feedback on math problems to see how that works, to see if it's accurate, to see if it's productive. And then lastly, on the curriculum side, and you can see this is happening all over the university, right? 1,000 flowers are blooming. The business school is thinking through how do they support the intersection of entrepreneurship and AI. All right, I had to remind myself where we were. That is the first transformative opportunity. And we only have half an hour left. So if you think that that's normal pacing or slow pacing, it's actually normal pacing. However, subsequent sections are not nearly as lengthy as this one because this felt like the most important one to go into detail with, given that we have a more faculty audience in the room today. Before we turn to the second question of student success, though, I do want to pause once again and ask, I'm sure you guys are all thinking she's asking such open-ended question, but was there something, and I would never do that in my course, but is there something that we haven't talked about that we should be talking about when it comes to pedagogy and the future of students as it relates to AI and roles? Yeah, we've got a hand right here.
Accessibility.
Can you say more?
Accessibility or democratizing AI tools, especially within the universities or different countries. We hire graduate students if they access tools state of the art. They may not be struggle as much as people they don't have access to the AI tools. So
are you saying it's sort of the equity question, right? There's going to be some folks who can use it. There's going to be some folks who can't use it, right? Well, and I think that's part of our responsibility, right? Making sure that we do to the extent possible, give people equal access to these things. Right here, we have another hand, Jeff.
Hey, I have a simple question. When you say 230 AI courses generated in University of Florida, what does an AI course mean?
Yeah, I think that's really at the discretion of the faculty members who are doing this, but using the examples of on the right, what I'm interpreting it as, and what I think this speaks to is, it is, again, the intersection of your discipline with a specific question of how is AI directly applicable to that, right? What is AI doing in that field?
We started to, I'll move to them on the camera. We started to compile a list of courses like that here too. AI oriented doesn't mean that every one of these classes is teaching you how to code and make the next AI. If it's in Vipin's department in computer science, some of those would be. But it's also, do you teach how to use those tools? Weatherhead is leading the way across the university in the number of courses that are using this because they're industry focused. They're, employer focused. What do the students need to go work in these companies?
And one more right here. Oh, a couple more.
I think one thing that we need to consider, because I'm a instructor and a librarian, is that source evaluation is going to be so important for students and to teach them where is this information coming from, because I heard at a talk earlier this week that GPTs are basically 3-year-olds trained on every piece of information in the world, which is not accurate. And we need to teach that to students, that where they're getting a lot of these sources is maybe academia.edu, but maybe a blog post. And how are they going to evaluate that? And beyond that, we are going to need to have shifts in scholarly communication in general and how the entire academic publishing system works from my point of view. Yeah, just so that we're getting more open scholarship is going to be absolutely key, but source evaluation, so it's going to be so important. And thank you for bringing up the equity and accessibility piece. Absolutely.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and on the sourcing front, as we build applications, we should be thinking about that too, right? I think Miro is coming up next, this BIO, to talk about how Case Western is building.
You can take that microphone off.
I should, yeah. You said that before and I didn't do it. Naughty. Yeah, and I think that is something we should be thinking about as we build AI applications as well, not just for students, but for staff as well. Are we citing our sources, right? So that as we build our AI applications, we are reminding students that every interaction, we can tell you where it came from. And you should be similarly looking for that in other applications of AI. Can it tell you where its information came from? In our cases, oftentimes it's a more limited source of information, just Case Western policies or databases. But even so, right, we should build that functionality in as well. Yes, right here. Is it? Oh yeah, there's a bottom switch.
Okay. Yeah, I have a sort of question coming from the humanities. A lot of the discussion has been about output, student output, what they're writing for their assignments. But I also wonder about input. And by that, what I mean is if I give my students a classical, beautiful text that I want them to understand the rhetoric and the poetic language and how the author is using it. And the students say like, okay, I just need to know what's in this text. Like, what's the data? What's the information? So I guess my question is, how do I convince students compel students to read in the original versus to just submit the text through AI and say like, what are the 3 main points?
I am not the person to answer that question. Does anyone have we got a hand right here.
Hi. This is not going to work over here. Sorry. So this is something that at the Center for Teaching and Learning at USite that we've talked about quite a bit, and it's not going to work here either, so I'll go stand in the corner. Something to consider with those speaker placements. So you have a slide on the next page that was looking at what was going on at London, and I think one of the things that is great is this pedagogical gut check, where we're all asking ourselves, is that going to be something that's going to be appropriate for our classes? And it's something that at the center that we constantly are reminding faculty, don't get caught up in the new and shiny things without really stopping to think, is this going to be the most appropriate thing for my class? What are the learning objectives? What are the goals for my class? What did I set out to accomplish with this? Or if somebody handed me a syllabus, what was that syllabus asking to accomplish? At the end of the semester, what is it that we want students to know and to be able to do? And if generative AI is a tool that can help accomplish that, great. If it's not, great. Yeah. But if it is in classes in the humanities, because that's where my appointment is as well in the music department, I think that we have to figure out, and we've seen this in some of the articles that have come out in the Chronicle, students' perceptions of things like active learning before the pandemic were way up here. Oh, active learning, experiential learning. During the pandemic, they crashed because we couldn't do it well. Mm-hmm. That was not something that you could actively do really well in remote settings, mm-hmm. depending upon your discipline. And now we're coming out of the pandemic, and it's come back up a little bit, but not to pre-pandemic levels. So perceptions among students, like the class of 2024 who are graduating this year, but started at Case remotely, is still relatively low with some of these things that were way up there that learning centers were touting prior to the pandemic. So part of it comes back to not just teaching the content and the skills and maybe the values that we bring to the classroom spaces, but also explaining to students why. 2 years ago, we had somebody in one of our sessions to say, well, are we supposed to teach people how to learn? And I thought that the faculty member was pulling my leg for a moment, but they were serious, and the answer is yes. So if we're teaching them how to learn, especially coming out of pandemic and remote learning environments, talking about accountability and equality and equity, then yes, we have to take some time to do that. So explaining how these tools are important, why these things are important, are now a part of things that we're going to have to probably be thinking about for the next 4 to 5, 6 years until we really do start to move further away from students who were not involved in remote instruction. So I love this point here, this pedagogical gut check. I love that language. Is it helpful to you? And if so, then figure out how that's going to have to take shape in your classes, but don't feel obligated. It's not the end all be all. It's a tool.
Thank you. That's great. Great answer. Superseded only by your excellent classes. So thank you. All right, I can't fight the urge to pace, so I am going to go over here. All right, so we're going to move into section 2, which is about student success. And like I previewed, we are going to be talking a little bit about chatbots here. As we get into this, I want to acknowledge that we often think of chatbots as this awful experience. And I think historically they really have been, right? No one here enjoys interacting with a chatbot. What CIOs often say is they get used, though. They get used. Well, they get used after hours, right? Because students really do want access to information 24/7. And our services are not always available 24/7 unless we build something automated or want to have a tutor working at 1 a.m. So, the vision here, the dream is that we're able to provide 24/7 personalized support, cradle to grave, metaphorically speaking, for our students, right? From the point that they are enrolling and asking questions about financial aid and getting support as a student, engaging with their classmates, getting really personalized advice on right fit careers, and then ultimately, can we engage alumni as well this way, right? So I think something that we maybe, I don't know if anyone truly had the dream of the one chatbot to rule them all, which is what we almost titled one of these slides, but at least the vision is certainly something that everybody shares in terms of how do we make sure that student success is not something that's only available on our schedule. In that spirit, Conmigo is a tool that I want to talk about. Conmigo is something that was built by the Khan Academy. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Khan Academy, which is really more of a K through 12 resource. It's not something that we typically talk about in higher ed, but they have a lot of information. And part of what we are trying to do when we build these tools, what we must do is get a handle on the structured and unstructured data that would serve as the input to train a model like this, or a tool like this. Khan Academy has that information. They were well positioned to build an AI tutor called Conmigo. And so a couple of things that I like about this is it is personalized to where a student is, right? That's the vision. And it is not going to tell you the answer. That sort of seems obvious, but I just want to show you what that looks like in practice, right? The student is literally saying, can you just tell me the answer? You've got to learn it for yourself. Okay, so what do we do next in this particular problem? Here's my guess. Good try, but that's not right. Let me redirect you. So it is doing virtually what a tutor should be doing live. There are guardrails. Schools are starting to build things like this. I think it's an interesting question. There's a question that needs to be, this is a really interesting moment in higher ed of top down, bottom up, right? We need clear signals from leadership, from an AI steering committee. What are the priorities for the institution? Is it personalized AI tutors? But then we also need to make sure that there's room for faculty, for researchers, for staff too. We often leave staff off to experiment with these tools. And if an idea is good, we scale it across campus. I don't think this is going to be a place where we find the computer science personalized tutor, and that's the thing that we scale across campus. It's probably just going to be too hard to do it that way. But still an interesting question. And I also want to acknowledge that your students may be coming in with a little bit more of an expectation that some of this is being done by chatbots. And here I'm referencing the LA school district, huge school district, one of the biggest school districts in the country, paid a lot of money to build their ed. They're calling it ed, which is a little bit, it's a student advisor, right? This is not an academic advisor. This is not a personalized tutor. It talks to student information so that both students and their parents can ask questions like, what are my grades and what can I do to improve my math? So you can see a couple of things going on here. Partially it is giving some guidance, but it is also talking to private data, secure data. All right, let's get to one of the examples in higher ed, though. This is this was Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has been in the AI game for a while with a specific reference to building an AI teaching assistant. This goes back almost a decade to when it partnered with IBM to create Jill Watson. Back in 2016, it took them 1,500 hours to create a syllabus. To create the tutor. And they were able to do that for one course. This got better over time. They eventually got it down to 5 hours in 2020. In 2022, they moved it to Chat GPT. They're still only deploying this in a couple of courses because, again, I can't reinforce this enough. It's a lot of data that you need to give to the model. But they're pretty excited about this. And walking over, going to acknowledge this hallucination rate. We've talked to Georgia Tech a couple of times. And so they're celebrating this reduction from 40% to 11%. You're probably thinking, oh my goodness, that is still way too high. What they would say is, it's not wrong necessarily with facts. If you ask it something outright, it's pretty good. That's closer to 99% accuracy. The longer you engage in a topic, that's when it starts to get a little bit more questionable. It starts to behave a little bit more oddly, and maybe it will have more, let's call it, copy editing problems than factual inaccuracy. But your first pass at a topic is going to be closer to a 99% accuracy rate. Yeah, please. We have so many mics going on here. This one's mine. I can't share it. I'm going to get you a different one. No worries. Thank you. I'll take that one back too. Or do you want to hold this one?
So as you look at these student tutors, is there any discussion about exposing copyrighted material to these AI tutors? Are there restrictions around that? Do you see future court cases coming up around that?
There are some interesting court cases already, right? New York Times has sued OpenAI. Sarah Silverman and other artists have sued OpenAI. In cases like this, I think it has a lot to do with intellectual property rules at your university. I don't know how it works here, right? But who owns the IP? In a situation like this, no, I don't anticipate IP issues arising because it is much more optional. But I do think, to your broader push, absolutely. Like, there are some big questions that need to be answered. I joined a presentation by our legal team on AI, which was fairly bland, I'm going to be honest with you. But I did hear one interesting thing. A couple of years ago, a photographer went to Indonesia, and he worked on this for a long time. It was a very big project of his. And he set up a camera in the jungle, and he walked away. And what he was trying to do, and what he ultimately succeeded in doing, was getting a monkey selfie, right? He got that monkey selfie, and I promise you, it's very likely that you have seen this image, because he then went to file a trademark, I believe in the US, for that image to say, this image belongs to me. And the court denied that trademark. It is now in the public domain. Fun little sidebar. PETA then said the monkey should have the ownership over that photo. They were not awarded that. But ultimately, that photo entered into the public domain because he himself did not take the photo. I think British Airways or Canadian Airways did recently sue and lose a court case. Oh yeah, thank you. Because their AI customer service did incorrectly give a refund or something, but they had to pay a passenger for whatever mistake happened because their chatbot made it. So there are questions to be sorted out here from a legal standpoint, but the IP piece for universities, I think, is perhaps slightly I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing, though.
I was mostly thinking about textbooks.
Okay.
So if a faculty member exposes a
part of
textbook to a chatbot,
yeah,
it's not training the chatbot on it, but it's using it as more of a search function of the textbook.
And that is why things like this take so long, because you can't use a textbook because it doesn't belong to you. All right, University of Michigan. We're going a little slowly here, so I'm going to try to pick up the pace. University of Michigan, one of the early movers post ChatGPT launch, and they've launched 2 tools. I'm going to call out this development time frame, and I will say the development cost was in the millions of dollars. Want to be really clear, every day, launch costs, development costs get lower for these types of applications. It's just cheaper and cheaper to spin these things up. But they have two tools, University of Maryland GPT, just like Triton GPT for UCSD. This is just ChatGPT for their environment. It's a safe place for people to work and experiment at little to no cost. Now, they have also launched UMazy, which connects, this is for students, it connects to a user's personal accounts. This is available for everybody. And it is connected to their Google account, their Canvas account, and they can ask it questions about themselves, right? So a couple different applications that they've made available to students. All right, let's get into productivity. And I'm going to move a little bit faster here. When it comes to productivity, which I think is inevitably one of the big questions around AI, we are certainly seeing businesses get into this space, right? Companies like Morgan Stanley, PwC, are absolutely already developing their own internal chatbots to do things like at Morgan Stanley, help financial advisors, just helping them answer basic business inquiries, even starting to provide tailored client investment recommendations. PwC is a little bit more related to tax and HR, but they're starting to use AI to conduct due diligence, offer legal insights. So certainly big investments being made from a corporate standpoint. This is a little bit bridging the gap. A couple examples from across the pond at University of Surrey and Birmingham. They have developed their own grading tools. That's interesting, right? A grading tool. How comfortable are we using it? How good is it? What I want to reinforce here is not just, independent development, innovation at these institutions, but also they are merchandising these. They are starting to sell these on the marketplace, right? So there is an interesting opportunity that as we build tools in which we have great confidence, can we also start to sell that back? University of Auburn is a good example here. They have a course that they started offering to faculty on AI. Then they started selling it to other universities because they got to the market fast. And they're able to say, look, if you need AI content to train faculty, we've got it for you. One of the places that we are keeping an eye on is the research space. There are some mixed messages here when it comes to proposal development research grants, and I want to share some of that here. NSF, back in 2023, had a news release that pretty much said reviewers couldn't upload proposals and content into non-approved platforms. And there were no approved platforms as of the time that we built the slide, which was a couple of weeks ago. And they are planning to, develop more generative AI policies. What I will call out is they themselves track their use of AI, including suggested reviewer dashboard, right, to make it easier to pair reviewers with proposals and to check if a proposal is a resubmission. Similar with National Institutes of Health, they largely prohibit AI use in peer review, but their argument was pretty weak here. They said this is based on confidentiality and security, and like I've hopefully made clear, there are ways to absolutely make this a secure use case. But again, faculty are using it here, right? You've got lots of data points at the bottom of ways in which research faculty are starting to use generative AI to enhance their proposals. So in the spirit of what can we do now to enhance productivity for faculty on the research development front, we've got some ideas here, including, what can we just do to equip faculty to start asking questions, engaging with AI with a specific reference of enhancing their research. Let's not call it output. Let's say productivity. I also want to recognize that Case Western is experimenting here. Hopefully I'm not scooping Miro too much, but I know that there's work at schools like Case Western and NYU to build things like research admin support tool, research grant assistant. One of the most troubling things for faculty is X expense permissible under a particular grant? And that is what NYU is trying to simplify. These can be incredibly burdensome processes. And so there's a lot of promise. These are not commercially, and when I say commercially, these are not enterprise-wide deployed yet, right? But these are exciting early experimentation with the research support. Couple other examples here. Maryville University, and now we're switching to other departments looking beyond research. Maryville University began using SIA to automate transcript review. And they said automating transcript review didn't lead them to fire anybody. Like I said earlier, it gave them 50% more time for their counselors to build relationships with students. So that's the one that I want to call out here. I guess I should acknowledge on the right because there is one school that I think I said this, that I can think of at least one school that has, let people go or redeployed them, as the case may be, when they automated transfer credit. Their goal is to eliminate that office size by 90%. That's the only school I've seen this happen in. All right, we're doing great. We got 2 more left. We're going to talk about these last few ideas quickly, going to maximizing enrollment and advancement yield with hyper-personalized content generation. I don't think this is shocking, right? Advancement and enrollment are functions where personalization is unavoidable. In fact, it is definitional to what those teams are trying to accomplish. We, Case Western, understand you. We are the right place for you, prospective student, you donor, to give your funds, because we have shared goals, aspirations, vision. I will say, we're certainly beyond the days of the mass mailer. We can already and have tailored our communication to different pathways of students or donors. But the promise of AI is that we can build even more customized outreach. So it's not just their interests. It also relates to, what they do, how they like to be communicated, and their preferred modality. That is the promise of AI. It's to hyper-personalize across vectors that we didn't necessarily think of as an option before. So a couple of examples of this. University of South Carolina, the other USC, they have used ChatGPT, and I think this is a great example of, my guess is they're just using the free platform. They used ChatGPT to generate messages during their annual giving day. And by using AI to develop more personalized message based on donor voice, they had their highest number of donors in 6 years, and they had 2,000 first-time donors. The second way they used it was to compose year-end appeals from deans. This is a pretty exhaustive exercise normally for the university, for any team. They ultimately were able to write nearly 400 appeals in the voice of specific deans across 20 different departments with minimal edits needed. And they estimate they saved 2 weeks of staff time. Here is normally where I would have a discussion about, do we need to review all output of AI? Does it need a human touch, even if it was AI developed? I have thoughts. I'm sure you have thoughts. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get into it just in the interest of time. So I am going to jump us ahead. This is an EAB example of customizing tours, because we offer a product called UVisit, E360 Tours. I think we've rebranded it. But essentially, AI allows us to customize which tours you see, rather than the school saying stop 1 is the thing everyone sees first, stop 2, stop 3, right? They're able to customize it now because they're using AI. All right. And that brings us to our last transformative opportunity. And this is really a nod to the reality of AI being a space, or rather research being a space where AI has long been deployed, where we've always tried to push the boundaries, but we're doing that at a faster pace today, which is to say, there's lots of examples like this. Company called AlphaFold. I think just yesterday, I got a text from one of my direct reports who's supposed to be on parental leave, and he texted me and said, I can't post this to Slack, can you? The AlphaFold has not limited itself to proteins, because they've now predicted the structure of millions of proteins. They're claiming to have predicted the structure of every molecule. That's incredible, right? That just, it's mind-blowing to think about. Another example comes from University of Florida. They have a partnership with NVIDIA. An alum is one of the leaders at NVIDIA. And they were able to develop something called Syngatortron. Training it on real patient data, it can develop synthetic patient data, so it can mimic real populations without privacy concerns. Very exciting. And lastly, from a little bit more the speech pathology front, there's a experiment to use AI to monitor young children to understand essentially developmental stages and processing abilities by looking at speech, facial expressions. So AI very much redefining traditional bounds of research. Not surprising then that countries across the globe are really trying to dial up their funding efforts here. And that's what I've captured on the right. Okay, we did it. Oh my God, we did it, you guys. Round of applause. We made it through. Thank you all so much. This has been a lot of fun for me, and hopefully gave you some food for thought. But I've got to turn the floor over to Jeff here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Anne. That was great. I think we asked and answered a lot of questions. I had good conversation throughout. I know Anne will be here for a little bit. Catch her in between or at the end of the session if you have more questions for her.